In this lesson we're going to have a look at some more of the basic functions available in Excel. I've opened a basic functions worksheet, and at the bottom of the screen you'll see a list of tabs, and we're going to work through these as we look at each function. So the first function is sum. We have looked at this in an earlier lesson, but just as a recap, sum adds up a group of figures. So this spreadsheet contains information on newspaper sales. So we've got the names of the newspapers and we've got the days of the week. And we'll be using this workbook right throughout this lesson. So sum adds up a group of cells, and if I want the result to appear at the bottom here, I would select that cell and enter the formula. These are the cells that I'm going to add up. So this will represent the total number of sales of newspapers for Monday. I'll place my cursor in there, and I can use Excel's AutoSum feature to put this formula in for me. I'm going to switch to the Formulas toolbar, and just over here we can see the AutoSum. So my cell selected, I'm going to click the AutoSum, and Excel puts the formula in for me. I just now need to confirm by pressing Enter, and the result will be displayed. Now I could do this for each of the cells that I want to place that formula in, but there is a quicker way. If I get rid of the formula I entered, all I'm going to do is to select my entire data area plus the area that's going to contain the totals. With this area selected, all I need to do now is to click on the sum function, and all of my formulas have been inserted for me. So that's the quickest way to add up the range of data when it's displayed in this format. Okay, let's move on and have a look at the maximum and minimum functions. So the idea of these functions is to find the maximum and minimum numbers in a group of data. So my cursor's in the maximum cell at the moment, and this is where I want my result to be displayed. So all I need to do is start typing the formula, and all formulas start with an equal sign, so I'll press equals, and the function name is just max. And when I type M to start with, Excel knows I want to enter a function, and it will list all the functions beginning with the letter M. If I continue typing and type the A, the list is then filtered down to the functions that match that criteria, and here I can see we've got max. So I'm going to use my cursor key to come down to max, and then I'll hit the tab key on the keyboard. Excel will then put the max and the open bracket in for me. All I need to do now is to select my range of data that I want to work with, and as I do that you'll see the formula update by entering the range that I've selected. I just now need to close my brackets and press enter, and that's the result. So the maximum value within this range of data is 28, and I can see we've got an entry for 28 there and also one underneath it. So maximum will find the maximum value in a range of data. Minimum does the opposite. So let's click on the cell we want to put that formula in, and this works in exactly the same way. We can type the formula in, or we can insert the formula by using the insert function button at the top of the screen. If I click on that one, the insert function dialog box will open, and minimum is right at the top of the list because we've used that recently. So I can select that one and say OK, and the function arguments window will open. From here I just need to select the range of data that I want to work on. So I have a collapse button here, and when I click on that one, the dialog box reduces down to a minimum size so that I can see my data. Once I'm here, I can highlight the information that I want to work on, in this case the data area, and when I do, the cell range that I select will be placed in the functions argument box. You'll also see how the formula is being constructed up in the formula bar. So now we can expand this function arguments window by clicking the expand button and simply say OK. And when we do, the result we get is 0. And that's what it's picked up on. It's picked up on the 0 in our data source here. So it's saying that this is the minimum cell, and it's quite right. But at this point it is worth pointing out that 0 is different from a blank cell. If we delete the 0 in that cell and we come down and have a look at our formula, the formula now says that the minimum value is 1. So although this cell is empty, it doesn't contain the number 0. So null cells are treated slightly different to actual 0 cells. So I'm going to pop that 0 back in, and my minimum reverts to 0. Okay, let's move on and have a look at the average function. So again, we're working with the same set of data, and here now we have a box for the average value. I'll make sure that that cell is selected so that my formula appears where I want it to, and I'll start to type equals. Excel is now aware that we're going to enter a formula, and when I start to type A for average, up pops the list, and if I continue to type, the list will be narrowed down, and I can cursor down to average and press the tab key on the keyboard. Average is then placed in the cell. All I need to do now is to select my range of data that I want to work on, in this case B6 to G13. And this time I'm not going to finish it off by closing the brackets, I'm just going to press enter. And when I do, Excel will actually correct that error for me. If you make mistakes while you're entering your formulas, Excel can sometimes be quite forgiving, but at other times it might just display a message to say that there is something wrong. So we've calculated the average, and the figure it's come up with is 11.29166. It's a little more accurate than we need it to be, and in just a while we'll see how we can cure that. Okay, let's move on to the count function. The count function will count the number of cells containing numeric values in a data set. If we look at our data, we've got 10 cells down and 8 cells across. So in the entire table here there's 80 cells, but not all of them contain numbers. So let's use the count function to find out how many have got numbers in them. I'll place my cursor in cell B17, and with the simple formulas I normally just like to type. So equals, and if I start to type count, the list of functions will appear. I select the one I want and press the tab button, and the formula starts to enter. And what I'm going to do now is to select the entire table, so all of the cells. And as I say, we know that there are 80 cells altogether. So I'll press enter, and it tells me that 63 of those cells contain numeric values. So it's ignoring the titles at the top of the table and down the left hand side. And again, when we look at our numerical data, we've got a 0 in here. Currently we've got a count of 63 cells with numeric values. If I delete the 0, that will drop to 62. This function won't count blank cells. So let's pop the 0 back in. And again, when I press enter, you'll see that 62 updates to 63. So moving on to the next function, very similar to the count, is count A or counter. This function will count the cells regardless if it's a numeric or text value. So again, we know that we've got 80 cells in all in our table. So let's start entering the formula. If I type in equals count, and if I come down to count A, press enter, and then select the data range, and again I'm going to select the entire table. Excel will update the formula for me, and I'll just press enter, and you can see that we've got 79 cells within that data range that contain data. One cell missing, and that will be this cell just up in the top corner, the blank cell with nothing in it. If I type something in there and press enter, that's now included in the count. So it has something in it, so count A will count the number of cells containing data, regardless if it's a number or a text value. Okay, let's move on to the next function, and that's count blank. And as you might have guessed, this function counts the blank cells in a data range. So we know that we've got one blank cell up in the top here, and we've also deleted the 0, so we've got another one here. So hopefully our result will be 2. Again, we'll come down to the cell that we want the formula to appear in, and we'll type in equals count and scroll down to blank, press the tab, and then select our data range. And again, I'm going to select the entire table. Once I've done that, I'll press enter, and you'll see that the result is 2. So we've got one blank cell here and one blank cell here. And of course, if we select more cells and delete the data in them, you'll see that the number of blank cells has increased. So count blank, that counts up the blank cells in a data range. Let's move on now to the round function, and this one's slightly different. Earlier on we calculated the average of the data range in our table, and it came to 11 point and then 8 digits. So this number contains 8 decimal places. And you might say that this is a pretty accurate number, but we really don't need to be that accurate. Depending on the data that we're using, we might not even require any decimal places at all. So let's round this number now to 2 decimal places. And we'll do that by making sure that we're in the correct cell and typing equals. And as you might have guessed, the function name for this is round. And as I start to type, the list of functions will appear. I'll press tab when I'm on the right one. And then I need to select the cell that I want to work on. So in this case I'm not selecting a range, I'm just working with this number here. So I'll click on that cell and the cell reference gets added to the formula, B17. Now my separator in this one is simply a comma. So I'll type in the comma and then I need to tell it how many decimal places I want to round to. In this case we're going to choose 2. So you can see my formula in the formula bar, round B17 to 2 decimal places. I will just close the brackets at the end there, and when I press enter, that number is then rounded to 2 decimal places. Let's go back in and adjust the formula slightly. So we'll come up in the formula bar, and this time we'll round it to 0 decimal places. Press enter, and this is probably a better representation of the average of the numbers we've selected. So the average function, if I double click, will show us the data area that we're working with. So we're working with just the data area in here. And the round function is based on the result of that formula. So we can refer to other formulas within our formula. Let's take that a step further. We've got the average of our data range displayed, and those of you who are mathematically minded will know how we actually calculate an average. We add all of the numbers up and then divide the total by the number of values that we've added up. So let's see how that works. I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to type in total. I'll come down and type in number of values, then we'll type average and come down again and round. Okay, so the data range that we're finding the average for is this data here in the white boxes. So the first thing we need to do is add all of these up. And Excel's already done it for us, and here's the result, 542. So let's place our cursor into cell E16 there, and let's refer to that value. So all I'm going to do is type in equals and click on the cell that contains the value. So the formula for this is simply equals H14. So whatever appears in H14 will now be displayed in this cell. I'll press enter, and there we have it, 542. Now we need to count the number of values in this white area. So for that we'll use the count function. And we'll select the data range and press enter. So there's 48 values in that data range. Now the average is worked out by taking the total and dividing it by the number of values. So in here I can type the formula equals the total divided by the number of values and press enter, and we end up with the same number that we have over here. So this formula, E16 divided by E17, is exactly the same as this formula here. They're both doing the same job. Let's come down to the round, And again, we'll round this figure off, this time to 0 decimal places. So equals round, select the figure you want to work on, type in your comma, the separator, and then type 0. Finally close the brackets and press enter. And we can see now that this number again has been rounded down to 11. It will also round numbers up. So if this number is greater than 11.5, the value of the round should be rounded up to 12. Well, let's put that to the test. Let's go back to our faithful 0 cell and type in 80. And when I do, you'll see that the average now has become 12.95. And because it's rounded in the round cell, it's knocked it up to 13. So that's an introduction to Excel's basic functions. There are many more, and we'll have a look at a few more as we work through the lessons.